into the world of Tim Walz. Mayor, when Walz was named as the vice presidential running mate of Kamala Harris, I got messages from friends and relatives across the country asking what I thought of Walz. I told them that while I certainly have a different ideology than Walz, that wasn't my main objection. It was just that Walz is fundamentally incompetent. I sent Bill Glon's fraud tracker to a few of them. Bill Glon is coming up in the show momentarily. He's with the Center of the American Experiment. The repeated discussion over the past weeks regarding the multiple frauds under the Walz administration and now his belated attempt to address the issue has pushed me to finally type this out. Forgive the length of this email. There's so much to be said. I own a small business. In 2017, my wife and I bought 5 hair salons of a national brand you would recognize. When COVID arrived, the federal government did a lot of stupid things, but the Walz administration made the situation much worse. I could write a book on the absurdities we had to deal with. I'll give you 2 examples. If we learned of a positive COVID test for any employee or customer, the state of Minnesota required us to close the shop for 24 hours and perform a deep clean. This term was never defined, but it didn't matter. By the time we received word of a positive test result, days would have passed since the exposure. The virus would have already infected anyone who had been in the salon, and deep cleaning would have been pointless, besides the fact that the salon is cleaned all the time anyway. But we were threatened with being shut down if we did not comply. In December of 2020, after months of asking the Minnesota Department of Health for data, I finally got the numbers saying that to date, a total of 41 cases of COVID in Minnesota had been traced to hair salons, 41 against a statewide total of about 300,000 cases at that point. Keep in mind, during the COVID era, you could freely visit a grocery store, a liquor store, Target, Walmart, any big box store, but we were ordered to completely shut down for over 2 months, and after that, we had to operate with restricted capacity. Due to COVID and the federal and state responses to the virus, in 2020, our business earned about half the revenue we would have expected otherwise. How many government agents had to trim their budgets by half? Isn't that a great question?
That's true.
We applied for a lot of federal assistance, but just so GLers understand, if you add up every nickel of grants, forgivable loans, and tax credits we received, it comes to just a little over half of the revenue we lost in 2020 alone. We saw reduced traffic and sales well into 2022. The last credit we could get was applied for in January of 2023. We received those funds in September of 2024, 18 months later. That's because the IRS and the feds were suspicious that there were fraudulent claims being filed. In applying for that government aid, the legalese was very clear that you would not only be on the hook for the money, but would face criminal penalties for any incorrect reporting or documentation. I was in constant anxiety that I might have missed something, failed to dot an I or cross a T. During a period of chaos, unknowns, and government ineptitude, I kept my staff paid, fought to keep the wheels turning on our business, and did my utmost to fulfill all the obligations put on us by a whole list of government agencies, boards, and departments. Was I a dummy or what? I should have just set up a phony school lunch program or a phony autism care center or a phony Medicare agency or all of them at once. Because in Walz's Minnesota, there were no obligations, no oversight, no consequences for failure or malfeasance, and no waiting for the money, apparently. You used the word outrage a few times on Monday's podcast. I don't think that's strong enough. Every time I think about the COVID era, I have to fight hard to keep myself from a white-hot, spitting fury, and Tim Walz's administration is at the heart of it. I'm not a Trump guy, but I am bleeping thrilled that Harris and Walz lost. No one deserves shame and then obscurity more than that ignorant, smug, incompetent jackass in the governor's office. I only wish the press and all of our fellow Minnesotans understand what a word I can't say Walz is. Thanks for Bill Glon and GL. We learned today that the Minnesota Historical Society is asking people to send them materials from the Walz Vice Presidential campaign. They want to archive that, presumably for a despair. A despair.
Whoa!
I think that was a Freudian slip.
That was perfect.
For a display. Jennifer Hubscher, curator of photography and moving images at the Historical Society, told NPR News they made the decision to document Walz's candidacy before Election Day. Since then, they've put out a call for materials. It's something that we're just looking to be proactive about and collect now, because a lot of these types of things, the yard signs, pins, stickers, clothing, a lot of people throw those out once the election is over, and so it can be more difficult to acquire them, Hubscher said. The prized possession of the Walz campaign for the Historical Society team is the camo hat, and the team has already snagged one. That's just so distinctly Tim Walz, Hubscher said delightedly. I think it resonates with a lot of Minnesotans hunting and outdoors and just making that connection. Where have I gone wrong? Why do I see a completely different situation with the Walz administration than, for example, this Hubscher must see? Why do I see it so differently than the Minnesotans who voted for him?
Why are you assuming that you have gone wrong? It's not you that have gone wrong, Joe. Where has she gone wrong?
Let me state it a different way. Why does he continue to enjoy, I would hope, in a shrinking circle of familiar people, why does he continue to enjoy this completely whimsical reputation as a friendly dad, neighbor who likes to change the air filter in his truck and go hunting? Why does he continue to enjoy that when we just know it's not that? He's not that person.
He's a total fraud.
I think it's because, well, number one, Minnesota pride, but more so, overshadowing that, it's because they don't turn on their own, even when they know bad things about them or their party or people in their party. They never turn on their own.
Even with, like, look at Mitchell. We mentioned her yesterday. They refused to because they needed her. Right. You're exactly right, Kenny.
Hubscher is the curator of photography. I said that, of moving images, and she said they are going to document Walz's candidacy up to Election Day. The effort is far from new. The Historical Society works swiftly to gather materials when candidates, including Governor Tim Pawlenty and former Vice President Hubert Humphrey, pursued higher office. The materials range widely, including everything from candidate buttons to a curated clothing line. And as we mentioned, according to the Historical Society, their prized acquisition is one of these